Okay. Hello, everybody. Sorry that we're a bit delayed starting. So you've got me, Lara, Giddy, and Judy here, and we're just going to run through some of the things that we did and saw on our trip at the end of January. And then we're going to allow some time at the end for some questions. But if you have any questions while we're going, or you see something on the screen that you specifically want to ask us a question about, I think you should be able to come off mute and just interrupt us, because we can only see some of you at the side of the screen. And I also just want to say at the beginning that this trip was something that we desperately wanted to do on behalf of the whole community, so that we had a chance to show our solidarity with Israel. But the absolute overwhelming thing that we felt was an enormous amount of thanks and gratitude from everybody that we saw and that we met on our trip. Which was quite overwhelming, really, and you'll see that a bit more as we go through. But this is us at the beginning of the trip. This is where we started, silly o'clock, 6 a.m. On the Sunday morning at Ben Gurion Airport. And the smiles there are probably a bit of nerves, a bit of trepidation,
and a lot of tiredness,
and some tiredness after a night flight. We made our way from the airport to Shoam, which is the twin town of Boreham Wood, where I think it's fair to say when we were planning this trip, we were unsure exactly where Shoam was, what it was, what we were going to see, what we were going to do. But we were treated like royalty. From this breakfast that we had right here that you can see, which was attended by the chief rabbi of Shoam, the mayor of Shoam, and about 6 or 7 different council members and representatives. They were at pains to point out how amazing it is to have a local connection to Boreham Wood, that we'd come out to see them and to support them. We davened shacharit with them first at the shul there with Rav Stav, who's their chief rabbi. And then we sat and we listened to the stories of how Shoam had responded to the awful attacks of the 7th of October. And we heard from, in particular, 3 different people. The mayor of Shoam, who talked to us about what it had been like for them in particular, because one of their own residents was a hostage. And he told us the horrific experience of Mir Shem, who had been held in captivity. But he also talked to us and he showed us the wonderful welcome that she got when she was released, and how he himself had driven her back from the airport in his own car, and she literally had a hero's welcome. And the people lined the streets, and the flags and the celebrations were incredible. And then do you want to talk about
so from that breakfast we went on to our second breakfast over there at Shalhevet School, which is a secondary school for girls, a religious girls secondary school in Shoam. They had a lot of pupils who, like everywhere across Israel, a lot of pupils who were deeply affected by the Hamas attacks of the 7th of October, albeit that they weren't geographically located near to those places, but still the number of girls that were affected was, everyone in the school knew someone. So the school was very used to from COVID times, remote learning. Seemingly more than the 3 of us are used to remote learning from using Zoom this evening, but they were very used to remote learning. But it was about making sure that the curriculum felt right and the environment felt right to bring the girls back into school. So not only did they need to look at how they were learning, but also what they were learning. So they wanted to ensure that they were providing a positive experience both for the girls and also for their staff as well, to make sure that they could feel safe in the school environment, but also be learning and be contributing to the war and the efforts there. So what they've done is they have allowed the girls to offer volunteering opportunities, whether that's picking fruit in fields or preparing meals for soldiers' families or families of those of Miluim, or kind of just going back and helping on a more kind of frontline basis with soldier centres and hospital visits and whatever else they're needed. Alongside that, they are making sure that the girls that are the most deeply affected, those that have got relatives that have either been that were killed on the 7th of October, or we met with one girl here who spoke to us, girl of, she can't be more than 14, 15. Her cousin was taken hostage, not on the 7th of October, but back in 2014 with Hadar Golden. So Oran Shaul was a soldier that was taken hostage on the in 2014, and we spoke to his cousin there, who was a pupil at the school, who was talking to us about how they've been keeping his memory alive. We know that he is no longer alive, but they've been keeping his memory alive through the school. And for his 30th birthday, made sure to have a party to celebrate him, albeit that without his body there. So it was a really poignant moment, because not only are these families suffering terribly currently, but also from this particular family who've been suffering for nearly 10 years now, since Oran was taken. And then actually, when we were in the airport, and everyone will have seen the pictures that you can see that from the airport, from Ben Gurion Airport, where you see all the hostages. We found the poster for Oran Shaul on the way home, and that was quite a touching moment. So from there, we went on to another school visit to Keshet. I want to say a few words about Keshet, Judy.
We were greeted by the kids standing at the front door, but we actually, as Lara said earlier, we felt that royalty. They were standing there with posters, "Welcome to Israel, thank you for coming." We delivered those cards that you see the kids holding in that picture, that were made by children, local children here, HJPS. So that was a lovely moment to see these lovely kids.
Oh. And then actually we should have had these the other way around.
Yeah.
But we then went north to Kibbutz Shfaim, which actually is a place that I visited several times in my late teens and had very fond memories of. It's a wonderful kibbutz, but they have taken in the residents from Kfar Aza and renamed part of it, in fact, the hotel and some of the other areas, Kfar Aza too, because they made it their own. They've given them a space, and most of the displaced families and residents that we met were living otherwise in hotels, cramped in together, whereas obviously being able to be on a kibbutz and have a similar lifestyle to the one that they were a little bit more used to, obviously had made a huge difference to them and to their settling in. But we also saw how they'd adapted Shfaim. They were building new porter cabin homes for the residents. They had turned over one area of their auditorium into what they call it a shop. Obviously, they don't pay for anything, but literally within hours of the residents from Kfar Aza being evacuated there, they were inundated with donations of food and clothing and baby toys and products and milk and nappies and everything, toiletries, to support all the evacuees with. And they created, literally, it looks like walking around a shop. They had labeled the areas by children's clothes and men's clothes and women's clothes, etc. And Shayna, who you can see in the picture with us there, she's the lady with the scarf, who's actually Louise Sager's first cousin, was wonderful. She took us on an incredible tour around everything that they'd done, and she introduced us to the residents. She showed us the pottery room and the arts and crafts studio, where they were offering the residents or the evacuees art therapy. And in fact, at one moment, there was one chap who was in the art room who had clearly had a very painful art therapy session that morning and was still too traumatized to even speak, but was busy at the potter's wheel doing some pottery, which they said had been immensely helpful for people to open up. We met many of the residents there, including a lady called Batya, who was with her tiny little yappy Chihuahua dog. And she told us that this dog had actually survived 30 hours in the mamad, in the shelter with her. And that remarkably, this dog, which barked the whole time we were there, hadn't barked once throughout that 30 hours. He had no food, no water, but somehow knew that he needed to remain silent so she wasn't found while she was hiding. And she just couldn't get over the miracle that was that the way the dog had been. And then we also met and spoke with a chap called Mickey, who hadn't spoken or opened up at all since the 7th of October, but very sadly had lost 2 of his children in the attacks on their kibbutz. And he just started to talk. He was so comforted by the fact that we were there and that we'd come to see them and to support them, that he wanted to talk to us. And he started speaking in English, and then he began to actually speak in Hebrew, because some of the group do speak Hebrew. And it was incredible to see his wife and daughter just couldn't engage with the conversation. They weren't able to talk to us at all, but he really opened up. It was very, very moving. And then we met with a lady called Naomi, who is their head of hostage relations. And she was just a lady who had taken this on herself. They still have 5 missing hostages from Kfar Aza, Emily Taylor, twins Ziv and Gully, Keith Siegel, whose wife Aviva was also a hostage, but has since been released. And actually our group, as you'll see in the later photo, went on to meet and one other. And they literally spend every moment of their day campaigning for the release of the 5 hostages, working with those who are traumatized from the events that they witnessed. They have a separate teen and youth program. And we talked to some of the teens who are actually coming to London next weekend for a bit of respite, just about what it was like, what the experience was like, how it felt to be able to be on the kibbutz as opposed to being cooped up in a hotel elsewhere.
Yeah, so from there we went to Netanya to see the residents of Kibbutz Halomim, which I'm just looking at the list of people on this call, and it seems that 80% of them are my family anyway. But Kibbutz Halomim is a kibbutz in the south of Israel on the Gaza border. It sits geographically between Be'eri and Kfar Aza. So just an idea of how close it is to the Gaza border. You can see and have always been able to see Gaza City from the houses, through the houses in Kibbutz Halomim. In Halomim, we witnessed a miracle on the 7th of October whereby the Hamas terrorists arrived but were never able to succeed in getting through the gates. Unfortunately, there were people that were killed, murdered in and around the kibbutz. Defending the kibbutz, there were those that were injured as well. And we saw videos that got released later on as well of people that had left the Nova Festival and came to seek refuge in the kibbutz. The terrorists saw them and shot them as they were coming to the gate, which obviously is horrific. We also saw the loss of life from the Nepalese farm workers and hostages taken from there. The hostages have now been returned, but the Nepalese farm workers' lives were lost as well, which is obviously horrific. But in the main part of the kibbutz and the housing infrastructure of the kibbutz was not damaged, and that's due to the bravery and heroism of 14 individuals fighting together to ensure that they could protect the kibbutz, so that make sure the picture on the left of your screen was possible. I obviously was deeply impacted by the events on the 7th of October from an Halomim perspective, from understanding what was going on the day, getting live updates from my family. But what we did was we actually heard from another friend called Tal, who has got 4 kids. She's in her late 30s. She's got 4 kids between the ages of, I think, 6 and 13. They woke up. Tal's husband is called Gal, and he was actually on Shmirah, on guard duty on the kibbutz. They always do it on a Friday night, and he was on duty on Friday night, and then came in at 6:25, and at 6:26 the first alarm went off. The first siren went off. They moved into the mamad, the safe room. They took knives with them from the kitchen just to make sure they had something with them, and kind of the back and forth ensued of text messages from the kibbutz, ones that I've had forwarded to me at the time, and haven't been brave enough to go back and scroll through exactly, the full detail since, but to ensure that the residents of the kibbutz stayed locked in their houses and made sure that they were locked up in the mamad. From a personal perspective, we were very lucky that we were fortunate that my only family members that were there were adults, but Tal and her 4 kids were cooped up in her bedroom, which is her mamad, trying to keep the kids calm, trying to play games with them, trying to tell them to keep their voices down, whilst at the same time not having any food for them, but only having a stash of chocolate, which is Tal's a crazy chocoholic. So to be able to just give kids chocolate and keep them calm was quite a task for her. At one point, she had to physically restrain one of their children on the bed just to keep the hyperactivity down, and keep them quiet. Tal was someone that didn't grow up in Alumim, and I'm sure there's people on this call that can relate to having nervousness about visiting Alumim. But at the same time, she knew that was their home, but she'd always played out in her head the dangers of living in such an area, the dangers of living somewhere so close to the border, and she was kept picturing herself, and I'm sorry, this is getting a little bit graphic for some people, but she'd pictured how, if a terrorist did infiltrate her house, how she would kill them. So it is someone that's of incredibly, she's an incredible person, but she made sure that she could defend herself even in the toughest of moments, because she'd been able to mentally block out what was going on, but to be able to take on the role of protecting her family. And to be fair, the 14 heroes that then took on and saved the kibbutz did exactly the same. They took on the role of protecting the kibbutz to ensure that, like I say, that picture on the left is possible, and I can think about visiting again and seeing my family in their home. From there, we headed back to Tel Aviv to go to Hostage Square.
And saw it in real life. Something that we'd all seen on the television since the, I don't know, 8th and 9th of October until recently. But to actually see it there and see the hugeness of it was really something that just lives with you. And by the time we got there as well, they had actually constructed a tunnel for us to just go through and imagine what it was like. But for us to go through a tunnel of just a few meters long, and you're out of it within 30 seconds was something. But to think of these poor people who are actually being held in tunnels was really very, very moving. And once again, people were thanking us for coming to visit them, which we all found terribly humbling, that they were actually thanking us. So that was Hostage Square.
We also met that night Romy Gornen's mother for the first time. And that was, I guess, the beginning of our relationship with her family, and one of the reasons why we were also keen to adopt her as a hostage when we started that scheme a couple of months ago. And then this is us with Danielle from Regrow Israel. And some of you may have seen during the Tu B'Shvat Seder that we had some information on Regrow Israel. For those of you less familiar with Israel and its geography, the area of the Western Negev is referred to as the breadbasket of Israel, and where much of the produce that Israel has and often exports as well is grown. And it was hugely impacted by the Hamas attacks. In fact, far more so than we had ever imagined. It seems that this was actually an explicit plan to try and damage the economy and the local farms. And we saw the most horrific pictures. And Danielle described to us what just the level of destruction and damage that was caused to these kibbutzim and yushavim during this time. It was horrific, from the animals that were burnt, and the canopies that were covered and that had been burnt, and the crops that were destroyed, the irrigation systems cut off, the power cut off. It was immense. And Danielle, who's been involved in NGO work and in agriculture for a long time, is very, very well connected with governments and with foreign ministries, decided that they had to do something to help these farmers, and they brought together this and formed this Regrow Israel, and they decided on a sort of 3-point plan. The primary bit was the first aid for the farms and the farmers, and helping them to try and harvest whatever crops they could salvage, but also to get the new equipment that they needed, to bring in volunteers to help on the farms, to think about quickly how they could replace the irrigation and the power. I mean, this will cost millions and millions and millions of dollars, pounds, to fix. Is no quick fix. They're looking for funding, but the primary aim was to try and support while they could what was left, and then think about how they would work on rebuilding. They had a special Regrow Israel week in February, which was shared widely, and you'll see they have their own Instagram here in the UK and a UK team. And anyone that's interested in getting involved and volunteering and in supporting Regrow, we have our very own Regrow Israel representative in Rachel Bernstein, who's been supporting them in the UK and is a member of our shawl. So I'm sure would be happy to talk to you a bit more about it. But that was, I think, a real eye-opener for us as a group. It's not something that we expected. I think perhaps when we were planning the trip, we were like, oh, this will be nice to do, but we didn't understand the impact of what we were about to see or hear. And it really gave us a completely different perspective on what was actually happening, and particularly on how Hamas had planned those attacks. We also met with another of Giddy's friends, Ronen, who talked to us about what life was like as a local Israeli, how they coped living there, how it is to work in a business where your boss and the person that works for you are both called up on reserve duty to Miloim, and you're left holding the fort because you still have a business that needs to run as well. He gave us hope, I think, as well. He talked about how there is hope, how people are more united than we think, and left us feeling buoyed and ready for our next visit, which was to Neve Hadassah.
Judy, do you want to cover Neve Hadassah? Because I'll do the
Neve
next bit.
Hadassah is a residential school for 12 to 18-year-olds. And once again, we were greeted with great enthusiasm by these kids. Many of them were from East Europe, right on
Yes.
Ukraine, Russia, speaking Ivrit by now, and very good English as well. So they took us around the whole area. They showed us the dormitories, they showed us the orchards. We actually tasted strawberries off the vine. They gave us gifts to take away with us. You can see in that picture Rabbi Chapper's holding a plant, but they actually gave us a bag of fresh produce as well to take away with us. And again, it was all very helpful. They even put on a little concert for us, which was gorgeous. It was just really lovely to hear them sing and really be happy. They were happy kids who from there would have gone on or told us they would be going into the army, and this is what this is all about. This is what they were looking forward to in a strange sort of way, but this is what they were here for. So they were there with their parents, but their parents were not on the campus. The parents were living elsewhere. But we had a really uplifting experience with them once again, and very welcoming.
Yeah, so the reason we went to Neve Hadassah was because some of you may remember it because we spoke about the Youth Aliyah rescue during our Kol Nidre appeal this year. It wasn't, it was 2 weeks after the Kol Nidre appeal, or a week and a half that the war began, and we never imagined that we'd have to visit them under such circumstances. But it was amazing to see where the funding's going and how it's making a difference and having an impact. And I think it really showed the connection between both our community and Youth Aliyah as a wider charity, but also to see it on the ground, giving these kids an oasis. It's in a part of the country, it's just outside Netanya, it's in a part of the country that isn't massively affected kind of geographically by the war at the moment. And so it gave them an oasis of, you can see it was beautiful weather, the sun was shining, an oasis away from the chaos, and gave these kids some hope. So it was really lovely to see. From there we took a drive south, and this was where it's fair to say that I won't even call us men, the boys of the trip really had a bit of fun. So we were fortunate enough to be able to visit Tel Nof Air Base. The Giddy, Matlin friends and family tour continued slightly longer, to be able to go and visit my thanks, Eddie. To be able to go and visit my cousin, who is an F-16. Well, he's a test pilot for the Israeli Air Force. He was a weapon system operator for the F-16 plane, so not this plane, a slightly smaller plane, but it was a pleasure and an honor to be able to go and see him in his place of work and hear from him and hear from his experiences on that day. He actually wrote an article in one of the national papers in Israel talking about his experiences of flying his F-16. He just so happened to be on operational duty that weekend, and to be able to, and he was straight up in the air not long after the first sirens were sounded. And he talks about in this article about his memories of flying over the south and seeing what he recognized as his parents' kibbutz on fire. So whilst maintaining a aircraft that is loaded with weapons, flying at a speed of up to 2 times the speed of sound, he was also watching his parents' kibbutz burn, which was, again, just an insight that I don't think any of us had ever expected to receive at the time, but just gave a real kind of a real show of how he has to work operationally, but also take the emotion out of it. And that's what he said he does. And anyone that knows us as a family knows that we're good at taking the emotion out of it. But no, you know, to be able to fly and operate a plane of that magnitude whilst seeing the destruction beneath you, and also not having communications with the ground the same way that you normally would during any other operation, because the Hamas terrorists had taken out the cameras, they'd taken out a lot of the infrastructure to maintain the ground to air communication and keep that flow going. So it was harrowing to hear, but it was really rewarding to be able to see him in that light and see what he does for not only for us as a family, but for us as a country and a people as well.
And he actually showed us, we sat in their briefing room. Honestly, it felt like we were being briefed for a mission, and showed us some of the images of them actually launching some of the weapons from his aircraft. And you can actually identify the ones that he's used. And it was incredible to watch as it zoomed in and they used it. So we were very, very fortunate to be able to see that and have access.
This is just obviously just one picture of all of us, but if you wanted detailed pictures, Eddie's got about 67,000.
We also watched them take off.
Oh yes, absolutely, yes. So we were stood just here, walking back from the planes, and I said to Eddie, I said, "Is there anything? Are there any planes taking off?" He said he was going to call the tower and check. And just that minute, you hear the roar and you hear the hum and you hear a sound like, you know, people would never have heard before. When we heard 3 F-15s take off in the space of a minute, it probably even less, probably about 40 seconds between the 3 planes, and then again 3 planes later. And it was as cool as it was and as fun as it was to see. Those planes were operational. Those planes were going to places for operational reason. And you check the news the next day and you see that there's been airstrikes in certain places, whether it was on the Lebanese border or in Gaza itself. It was, you know, you're reminded that actually, as cool as it might seem to us, these planes have got an operational reason and they're keeping us safe, and they're keeping, you know, because of them we could go about our trip and do this in honesty, relative security. I don't think at any point any of us felt under threat being in Israel. I think we all realized that actually we were very privileged to be able to be there, but also felt incredibly safe the whole time. So from the Air Force to the Army.
I want to talk about this.
Yeah.
This has to be one of the most incredible experiences, the highlight for us of our trip. We were very fortunate to join an amazing group organised by Josh Pomerantz, who's a former BES member, and some others like Gary Yantin, who also was a BES member. And as much as they could, since it was safe to do so from the 7th of October, they've been organising barbecues for the soldiers to say thank you. And it was very hard for us to find one that was not in a zone we were not allowed to travel to, and not outside a border we were not allowed to go to. But we settled on this one, which was at Maccabim. And you can see how many soldiers were here. This was an amazing group. They had literally just come out of Gaza that day or that morning. They would come here for some respite, some R&R, some training before they were going to be dispatched up north to the Lebanon border. And you can see there is our very own Rabbi Chapa cooking more burgers than he's ever cooked in his life. It was,
I think, more burgers than anyone's ever cooked in a suit and tie as well.
yes, this is true. Full suit, tie, and jacket. It was an amazing experience. A real mixed bunch of soldiers. You can see there, from religious to non-religious. Very young. We spoke to one called Jonathan. He was so young. He was about 21. Literally, he originally lived in Paris. His family had made Aliyah. He talked to us about just how incredible it was that we came to be there with them. This was the 94th barbecue that this group had organized. I mean, absolutely amazing. And we cooked for them. I chopped more shawarma than I've ever chopped before. They had very well prepared for it. They have a whole system. And then we sat and ate with them, and then we danced, and it was amazing. The ruach was incredible, and they really were. I mean, they couldn't thank us enough for coming. Then somebody had a birthday. They'd been sent a birthday cake by their family. This just was for them like a really incredible way to end a very difficult and stressful period of time before they went into their respite. But for them, they really didn't stop thanking us.
No.
Amazing, absolute highlight.
Absolutely. And just to follow up on that, for me, part of a lot of the trip was about pride, as you know, as well as being able to show Israel in its current light and in it all its beauty. But a lot of it was about pride because of the personal connections. When Josh first did his first barbecue, it was in a place called Nativot, just on the Gaza border. Well, so it's probably about 8 kilometers from the Gaza border, somewhere that I've been used to visiting for years as kids growing up, and even still now. But when Josh first told me he was going there to do a barbecue, he was really nervous about how close it was to the Gaza border. And I mean, even since then, they've been, you know, within touching distance of the fence. But it was a moment of immense pride to be able to see what they've created and what they've done and how they've turned it around and how they've made this into a real operation, and that making sure that they've got an army of volunteers. You know, they say an army marches on its stomach, and this is very much true for Hamangalistim and the work that they do. It's not just a couple of blokes with a disposable barbecue. This is a real operation to make sure that the soldiers are fed, the morale is lifted, and you know, whether it's with live music like we had, or any sort of other music, they make sure that the soldiers feel like they know that people care for them, people are looking after them, and we're thankful for everything they do for us. So it was a really, really special moment. So that concluded day 2, and day 3 started with a slightly more somber note.
Our Herzl. I'd never been there before. It was a little bit of a baptism, excuse the word, baptism of fire. We actually visited where Nathaniel Young had been buried, and were addressed by his brother most eloquently. But it was the most emotional time, I think, for all of us there. We actually met Danny Newman there, who grew up in Boreham Wood. Some of you might remember him too. So he came and he spoke to us with real words of what should I say?
Well, it's very powerful, wasn't it?
Yeah, really powerful words. And that was the morning that unfortunately they were about to have Fall Levine, but luckily we weren't there for that. We were there earlier than that. We also had Rabbi Chappa's sons join us there. That was the first time I think that they had joined us as well. So it was a very emotional time for all of us, I think.
Yisroel was at school with Nathaniel as well. So that personal connection, he's so young, he was British. We'd all heard of Nathaniel in the media as well. It was the most emotional and unbelievable. And it's so cold, and you could feel the cold almost in you because it was raining. And then also you can see in the picture there, that's Gary Antin on the right, and his daughter Ariella. Gary also used to live originally in Boreham Wood, and Ariella was serving she was actually in the Navy, but just next to Nathaniel is her friend Lavi Lifshitz, who sadly was also killed. And this is the first time she'd spoken about Lavi, and she was so eloquent and so collected, and she really wanted to come and share his story. He was a photographer, and he spent his whole time while he was in the army, not when he wasn't on duty fighting, taking photos of the soldiers and trying to capture them and the real kind of person behind them. And he'd done a whole collection of them. And she talked about how proud she was of that, and then showed some of the things that were on his grave that their family and friends had left. So yeah, a very, very emotional, raw and moving morning. And particularly we decided that we wanted to let Elliot say Kaddish, but we didn't have enough men for a minyan. And there were a couple of boys standing, or men, 2 men standing at the grave just behind us with 2 ladies. And we asked them if they would like to say, come and join us for minyan and say Kaddish. And they came over, and Elliot said Kaddish. And we noticed that they too were saying Kaddish. And we realized very sadly that just a few months before, or only a month even, they had lost their son and their brother, who was also in the army. And my maternal instinct just kicked in, and I went over to hug this mother who literally was quivering and shaking. And she told me that her son was just 5 days short of finishing his service in the army, and he was killed. And it really brought home just how young these soldiers are. But she said he died fighting for his country, and Elliot said the same. They were so proud to call themselves soldiers fighting for Israel. And while she was absolutely broken and their family was broken, she knew that he had died fighting and defending Israel. And she knew deep down in her heart the pride that he had and that she had. And it was just overwhelming. I'll never forget that morning, ever.
So from there, we headed over to Shaare Zedek Hospital. Geographically, those that know, it's literally a 2-minute walk between Shaare Zedek Hospital and Har Herzl. There we were. So we were facilitated at Har Herzl at Shaare Zedek by Oshrit Cowan and Katie Corkin, both Boreham Wood and Elstree residents as well. Oshrit is the UK CEO of Shaare Zedek, so she facilitated the meeting there with Audrey. We met with a few people from the hospital there. We met with the rabbi of the hospital, chief rabbi of the hospital, talking about how the kind of the halachic implications of offering medicine within the hospital. And then we met with Joey, who was the IDF spokesperson and had been there since the 2nd week of the war. He was there to ensure that the soldiers that were brought to Shaare Zedek were treated in the right way and left alone when needed, and managed both their needs and their needs of their family to ensure that through that difficult period, that not only are the state and the army looking after their soldiers and their people, they're also looking after their families as well. So that was very special to see, to kind of get a whole view of the complete life cycle of anything that happens to our injured soldiers. We also went to look at a new installation underground of what will be the new ICU unit to support. Well, the hospital realised that on the 9th and 10th floors, where their current ICU is, it's a massive risk. Should the sirens go off, the last place you want ICU patients is high up and at risk. So they've fitted, similar to what we saw during COVID with Nightingale style hospitals popping up. They've fitted underground in the last 2 months, and ICUs with I don't know if it's like 30 beds or something in there to ensure that they can meet demand, God forbid, should they need, and should rockets be fired on Jerusalem. Since the start of the war, there have been 600 soldiers treated at Shaare Zedek. That was the number from January. Obviously, that probably has changed, unfortunately, since then. But currently, at that time, there had been 600 soldiers treated in Shaare Zedek. This picture is one from the new cancer center in Shaare Zedek, which was lovely to see, but had a good cafe, to be fair. So if anyone wants to go for treatment, go there.
Then we went on to Magen David Adom, where Aryeh Myers greeted us. Aryeh Myers also lived in Boreham Wood for a short time when he first married. He's on the far right of that picture, and he told us or explained to us the harrowing details of what happened on that first day of the war, including recordings of calls that were made by people and one very young boy, which we all found most harrowing at all. 9-year-old boy making a call and speaking with such composure to the call handler, having witnessed his parents being shot in front of his eyes. And he'd hidden in a cupboard he was 9 and he was hiding in a cupboard with his 6-year-old sister. He also thought that his other sister had been murdered as well, but it appears in the end that she hadn't been killed, but she unfortunately got taken away by the Hamas terrorists. He got rescued, thankfully, but Aryeh told us, gave us other awful details about ambulances being disabled and all the goings on that first day. He did say that that very day, new ambulances had actually been dedicated in the names of some of the people that had unfortunately been murdered that day. So we then saw the call handling center, which is just amazing, an example to our national health ambulance centers here, where calls are answered very, very quickly there, and where the call handlers have a view of every single ambulance that is available, where the defibrillators are around the country as well. A very seamless operation, and it was really the most amazing thing to witness.
That was pretty much the end of the third day, and then fourth day.
So this is us in the garden of Rabbi Benji Levy's house in Jerusalem. And all the way through this trip, and as we were planning this trip, I was trying to work out how we could get to see Rabbi Levy. He's somebody I'd started following on Instagram. He's become a bit of an Instagram influencer, but in a different way to many of the influencers that were working or have been posting since the 7th of October. He's an incredible man who's written multiple books. He's been the head teacher of a secondary school in Australia. He's a communal rabbi in Jerusalem. He and his wife run a Jewish counseling program. He just has fingers in lots of pies, but it was the way in which he had given so much hope and so much inspiration. And having been on this incredible roller coaster over the past sort of 2.5-3 days, we really wanted to try and end our trip on a bit more of a positive, a story of hope, a story of unity. And we asked Rabbi Benji if he would give us a message, if he would talk to us as a group and hopefully send us home with something. And he told us, and this really hit home for me, and I think for many of us, that there was a reason that the 8 of us had gone on this trip to Israel. Each of us had a different reason. Some of us had very personal connections, some of us had friends. I personally hadn't been to Israel for a long time, but felt a real pull. And he said, there's a reason each of you is here, and each of you will find meaning in this trip and find something different to do when you come back. Because that was the other thing. We didn't want to just go have a trip to be very impactful for the 8 of us, but for us not to be able to share any of that when we came back. And that message, I think, gave all of us inspiration and confidence and hope to come back and to do something different. And I hope that many of you will have experienced over the last weekend and over the past Shabbat some of the impact from our trip, because that was put together by our group. Everybody inputted, everyone suggested ideas, everyone came together with ways that we could try to get some of our trip into this weekend. And I think that's exactly what Rabbi Benji meant when he said, you will all find your meaning and your message in your way. And it was really impactful. And I hope that at some point very soon we'll be able to bring Rabbi Benji to our community, and you'll all be able to hear from him and feel as inspired as we did that morning.
And then no Israel trip's really complete without a visit to the Kotel. I'll talk about this picture first before I jump back to the previous. I said in my notes that a lot of you may have seen that if ever the Jewish people needed a symbol of hope and a reminder of the indestructible nature of our people, then the Kotel is it. The Kotel holds the last remaining memories of the Bet Mikdash, of the temple, and to be able to still stand there in a time where the war is going on, in a time where we feel like our backs are, pardon the pun, to the wall. We found amazing meaning and amazing sense of being there. Just that morning, there were a group of soldiers at their own tekas at the Kotel, at their own ceremony at the Kotel, to make sure as they graduated to get their berets, which was incredibly moving to see. But opposite the Kotel, in a place, in the plaza that we all know like the back of our hands, was this collection of yahrzeit candles, of 1,200, 1,300 yahrzeit candles. Each, you can't see it here unless maybe I'll zoom in. Each of these squiggles that you see here is a name of an individual, name of a man, woman, boy, girl, soldier, civilian that was killed on or since the start of the war, on the 7th of October or since the start of the war. And it's incredibly meaningful to be able to stand there and light a candle for the people that we've never met, people that we've never known, people that will never know. No one will know that we're lighting a candle for them other than us. But it was really, really impactful to be able to be there, to be able to do that, and to ensure that the light doesn't diminish. We remember them, as it says on the top there, I remember them for their good and everything that they do. And it was really, really impactful to make sure that we were the ones that were continuing that light. Yes, we'd come all the way forward, and yes, we'd been on ups and downs, and a lot of us had never met any of the people. Unfortunately, we found some names in there that one or two of us did know personally. I know that I went looking for names in that, and it was like finding a needle in a haystack to find the names of the people that I knew that were killed on or since the 7th of October. But it meant something, and we needed to make sure that we took that and figuratively took that light and brought it back with us. But to go back to that picture beneath and just show that it's not just the 8 of us that have been on that journey. We want to make sure that that lives on, and hopefully this is something that we can do again on a bigger and wider spectrum for the community. There are a load of videos that Eddie's prepared, but I'm pretty sure he'll run through those tomorrow, but we'll be able to share the links around.
Yeah, that's great, because I'm not sure you'll hear the sound.
Separately, but I'm going to stop it there and just ask if anyone's got any questions or comments. Just unmute yourself and just shout out, really. Yeah.
Can they unmute? Maybe
not even anything from Sam.
Oh,
here he is.
Hi. I just really want to know what they served in the coffee.
Oh, it was really. We had a really good sandwich, and I've booked you in.
Excellent, thank you.
Recommend it. It smelled nice. It was very clean, and the food was delicious.
You recommend the cancer centre? Excellent. Yeah. Gilly, thank you for doing. All of you, thank you for doing the update. It was insightful to share, and it's been interesting as we'll come to the things that you guys have done at Shaw. But it's been hard really to get a sense of the trip as a whole, because there's been bits and pieces. So thank you for doing the update, and thank you for taking us through it as well. I guess for those of us that didn't go and might be looking to plan trips or bits and pieces, and we're not going on a full sort of Giddy Matlin family and friends tour, what's one or two sort of small things that you would recommend as must-dos for people if they're planning to visit over Pesach or over the summer? Well, hopefully it's all sorted by the summer. Let's say over Pesach, what one or two things that people should do to get a sense of October the 7th?
Couple of things that I didn't do that I would be very keen on doing is visiting the site of the Nova. First, I really, from other people's experiences of that, I definitely say do that. But on a more practical level, get involved in a barbecue. That's probably the most rewarding thing I've ever done. And just talk to people, really. I think just talking to people and letting them tell their story. Everyone's got their own story from the 7th of October, be it people that were, miles away in the Dead Sea, overslept and didn't hear anything and worried their family sick because they didn't answer their phone, or the people that were involved on the front line on the 7th of October, or the people that were have lost their houses since. There's an incredible amount of people that have been that are displaced at the minute, be it from the south, and there's good positive news from the south in that people can start moving back and are starting to move back at the moment, but there are communities in the north that will not be back for a long time. So I'd just say speak to them, let them speak, but speak to them.
The two things that I think I found incredibly impactful were not actually Hostage Square itself, because I actually, as a non-Hebrew speaker, found that quite difficult to access. Everything there is written in Hebrew, but at Hostage Square there's a family tent, and a lot of the families of the hostages are based there. Go inside, go and talk to people there, hear their stories. And the same in Jerusalem, outside Netanyahu's house, there's also a tent where the family are having effectively a sit-in protest, and families of hostages. And there's an incredible organization, the Family Hostage Forum, who are basically manning this tent 24/7. And again, speaking to them and showing them that you've come to support was massively impactful. And we met and heard some of the stories, and that's where, if you listen again tomorrow, I'm sure Eddie and Rachel and Ophir will talk to you about their experience of meeting Aviva Siegel, who that they met there that evening. So I think those two would be key things to do. The other thing is go and volunteer. There's, but do it through a proper organization like Leke. We can share some links. There are so many organizations that need help, whether it's making food, whether it's harvesting some of the crops, whether it's coordinating more gloves or hats or clothing for the soldiers. That's a really a good way to get involved and to really feel a part of what's happening. But go and spend money, go and be there, and show your support. Any other questions?
It's Rebecca now. Hi.
Hello.
Thank you so much, all three of you. It was so insightful and thoughtful to hear your reflections. I think this is so important that you're able to sort of share that testimony back with our community. But I guess, have you given any thought to how it goes beyond our community to our non-Jewish colleagues, friends, etc., into the wider community, and how that would be packaged up? I'm not saying now is maybe even the right time, because I don't even know if it would fall on ears that are listening, but at some point that this testimony is powerful, and that needs to be relayed from trusted, authoritative voices. And I think that there's value in that.
So I think that there are a couple of things that we started to do. And so first of all, the vigil on a Friday is an incredibly powerful way for us to share the stories of hostages, and to open it up to a wider audience, because we have plenty of people who are not Jewish, not affiliated, not even from the local area. So that's one way. And we've got media coming most weeks, and Eddie has done an amazing job of reaching out to media, not just on the day, but afterwards with information and press releases. So that's one thing that we've started to do, and we will do more. The other thing is we have a very powerful opportunity in our connection with Shoam, and although that is obviously a twinning, it's with the whole of the council of Boreham Wood, and you might say that that's small, but it starts somewhere. And I think we're looking to work on how we can do more with them, and perhaps bring some of the Shoam team over to us, but also for a completely mixed audience. So to do in the council, to do locally in Boreham Wood, to go to Parliament to meet with Oliver Dowden and more. So that's another option. And then the other thing that we've been doing is, while we were there, we were hoping to meet a couple of journalists. I know that you probably have read and seen two in particular, Natalie Lisbona and Yotam who have been writing both for Jewish and non-Jewish press, nap a lot for the Daily Mail. And we've been talking to them about what we've been seeing, what's happening here and what we've been doing, but also what we saw we were out there, and working very closely with her to try and give her some stories that she can start to try and use in the national press as well. So it's a beginning, I'd say, and there's more to do. But those are just kind of 3 tangible things that we've done, well, both before and since the trip, to try and reach a wider audience. But we're open to suggestions for other things as well.
Thanks. Good emoji. Anyone else before we close the doors? Not kicking you out. Just anyone else?
Amazing.
No,
Okay.
I think we're all good.
Thank you so much for dialing in and listening.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.